A single dad thought he was just helping a stranger in a snowstorm. One night, one act of kindness. But by morning she's gone. And in her place, a matte black card, and a note that says, "Call me." When he does, he learns she's no ordinary traveler, holds the power to change his life and his entire town. But before he can decide if he trusts her, a single whisper in a diner sparks a storm of rumors that threaten to destroy everything. As the town turns against them, secrets surface, danger creeps closer, and he's forced to choose stay silent and safe, or risk everything for the truth. What's really behind the black card? Why did she come to him? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The wind howled through the empty streets of Maple Hollow as Eli Carter wiped his grease-stained hands on a shop rag. The familiar scent of motor oil and metal hung in the air of Carter's garage as he did his final walkthrough, checking that everything was secured for the night. Dark clouds loomed overhead, their ominous presence promising the storm the Weather Service had been warning about all day. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Ruby's text was clear. "Dad, please hurry home. The snow's starting." Eli smiled at his daughter's concern. At 14, Ruby had taken on so much responsibility since they lost Tessa, sometimes too much. He typed back quickly, "Closing up now. Start some chilly warming?" The wind rattled the garage's metal siding as he shut off the lights and locked up. Eli pulled his worn leather jacket tighter, hurrying to his truck. The first few snowflakes were already dancing in the beam of the security light. The drive home usually took 15 minutes, but Eli knew better than to rush in weather like this. His truck's headlights cut through the increasing snowfall as he carefully navigated the winding county road. The radio crackled with updates about the approaching storm, a March monster, they called it, sweeping down from Canada. About 2 miles from the county line, a flash of yellow caught his eye. Hazard lights blinked weakly through the thickening snow. Eli slowed. Years of military training and small-town responsibility making the decision for him before he could even think it through. He pulled over, setting his own hazards. Through his windshield, he could make out the shape of a dark SUV. Its wheels turned awkwardly toward the ditch. As he stepped out into the swirling snow, a woman emerged from the driver's side, clutching a puffy coat around herself. "Oh, thank goodness," she called out, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "We've been stuck here for almost an hour. No cell service." Eli approached, snow crunching under his boots. The woman was probably around his age, with elegant features and worried eyes. A small face peered out from the back seat, a young boy, maybe 5 or 6. "I'm Eli Carter," he said, raising his voice over the wind. "Local mechanic. What seems to be the problem?" "Mara Whitfield," she replied, extending a gloved hand. "And that's my son Noah. The engine just died. We were trying to make it to Columbus, but this storm came out of nowhere." Eli nodded, already assessing the situation. The snow was falling faster now, coating everything in white. "Mind if I take a look?" After a quick check under the hood, he knew this wasn't a quick fix. The timing belt had snapped, a garage job, not roadside repair weather. He glanced at Mara and Noah, noting their shivering despite the heavy coats. "Listen," he said, closing the hood. "My place is about 3 miles from here. I can tow you there, get you warm. This storm's only getting worse, and nothing's going to be open tonight." Mara hesitated, studying his face. Eli understood her caution. A stranger's offer on a dark road wasn't always safe, but neither was freezing in a broken-down car. "I have a daughter about 8 years older than your boy," he added gently. "We've got plenty of room, and that chili I mentioned should be hot by now." A particularly fierce gust of wind rocked the SUV, and Noah's teeth chattered audibly. That seemed to decide it for Mara. "Thank you," she said. "We'd be very grateful." It took about 15 minutes to hook up the tow line properly, Eli's fingers growing numb despite his work gloves. Mara and Noah transferred to his truck's warm cab, Noah sandwiched safely between them. The boy's eyes were wide as he watched Eli work the gears. "Are you really a mechanic?" he asked, his small voice full of wonder. "Sure am," Eli replied, carefully steering through the thickening snow. "Got a garage in town. Been fixing cars since I was about twice your age. Mom's car made a funny noise and then just stopped, Noah reported seriously. Like it was tired. Eli couldn't help but smile. Sometimes cars do get tired, but we'll figure out what's wrong when the storm passes. Mara had been quiet, but now she spoke up. I can't thank you enough for stopping. I was starting to worry. No need for thanks, Eli said, concentrating on the barely visible road. It's what neighbors do. But we're not neighbors, Noah pointed out with a child's directness. We're lost. Well, sometimes neighbors are just people who help when help's needed, Eli explained, thinking of how Maple Hollow had rallied around him and Ruby after Tessa passed. Finally, his farmhouse came into view, warm lights glowing through the snow. Ruby must have turned on every lamp in the place. He carefully maneuvered the truck and SUV into the long driveway, the snow now several inches deep. As they approached the front door, it flew open. Ruby stood there, backlit by the warm interior lights, a concerned expression on her face. Dad, I was getting worried. Her eyes widened as she took in their guests. Oh, hi. Ruby, this is Mrs. Whitfield and Noah, Eli explained as they stomped into the mudroom. Their car broke down near the county line. They'll be staying until the storm passes. Ruby's face lit up with understanding and immediate warmth. I've got chili ready and I just made hot chocolate. Here, let me take your coats. Mara began unwinding her scarf, revealing more of her face in the warm light. You're very kind, both of you. Ruby was already wrapping them in the thick blankets she'd gathered, her natural hospitality taking over. The chili's Mom's recipe, she said, leading them toward the kitchen. Dad always says it's the best cure for a cold night. Eli watched as his daughter efficiently settled their unexpected guests at the kitchen table, ladling out steaming bowls of chili and passing out mugs of hot chocolate topped with mini marshmallows. Noah's eyes grew wide at the sight of the marshmallows, his earlier shivers already subsiding in the warmth of the kitchen. The warmth from the kitchen stove filled the Carter farmhouse as Eli stirred the pot of chili, adding an extra dash of cumin. The spicy aroma, mixed with the earthy scent of wood smoke from the fireplace where their unexpected guests were thawing out. Through the kitchen doorway, he could see Ruby sitting cross-legged on the braided rug, showing Noah how to work the wooden puzzle she'd gotten last Christmas. See? This piece goes here, Ruby explained, her voice gentle as she guided Noah's small hands. And then this one connects to make the tree branch. Noah's brow furrowed in concentration, his earlier shivers forgotten as he focused on fitting the pieces together. His mother, Mara, sat perched on the edge of the worn armchair, her posture still somewhat rigid despite the casual setting. She kept glancing between her son and the storm-darkened windows, where snow pelted against the glass in waves. The chili should be heated through now, Eli said, reaching for the stack of bowls in the cabinet. Ruby, can you clear your puzzle so we can eat? Sure, Dad. Ruby helped Noah carefully move the pieces to the coffee table. We can finish it after dinner. Eli ladled the steaming chili into bowls, adding a sprinkle of shredded cheese on top, something his late wife Tessa had always insisted made everything taste better. He handed the first bowl to Mara, noticing how she seemed to study his movements, as if cataloging every detail of her surroundings. Thank you, she said softly, accepting the bowl. This is very kind of you. It's nothing, Eli replied, passing bowls to the kids. Nobody should be out in weather like this. They settled around the coffee table, the storm creating a cozy barrier between their warm circle and the hostile weather outside. Ruby chatted easily about school and her latest science project, while Noah mostly focused on his food, occasionally looking to his mother as if for permission to speak. Were you headed somewhere specific? Eli asked during a lull in the conversation. Before the storm, I mean. Mara stirred her chili, her spoon making careful circles. Just passing through, she said, her tone pleasant but closed. We've been visiting various places lately. Eli nodded, recognizing the deliberate vagueness in her answer. He'd seen enough in his years of service to recognize when someone preferred to keep their business private. Well, you picked quite a night to pass through Maple Hollow. The weather forecast didn't mention this storm, Mara said, a hint of frustration crossing her face. It seemed to come out of nowhere. "March in Ohio," Ruby chimed in with the wisdom of a local. "Mom used to say, if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes." A small laugh suddenly burst from Noah, the first they'd heard, as he accidentally dropped a piece of cheese on the floor. The family's ancient golden retriever, Max, immediately appeared to clean up the offering, his tail thumping against the floor. "Max," Ruby giggled, "you're such an opportunist." Noah's face lit up as he watched the dog, his previous shyness momentarily forgotten. "Can I pet him?" "Of course," Ruby said. But Eli noticed how Mara straightened slightly, her eyes sharp and attentive as Noah reached out to stroke Max's soft fur. The wind howled louder outside, rattling the windows in their frames. Eli glanced at the old clock on the mantel, its hands showing nearly 9. "The guest room is made up," he said, looking at Mara. "You're welcome to stay the night. The storm's only getting worse." Mara's fingers tightened slightly around her spoon before relaxing. She looked down at Noah, who was now yawning despite his best efforts to stay awake. "I suppose that would be safest," she said finally. "If you're sure it's no trouble." "No trouble at all," Eli assured her. "Ruby, why don't you show them where everything is? I need to check the generator before turning in." Ruby nodded, already gathering the empty bowls. "The bathroom's upstairs, and I put fresh towels in there earlier," she told Mara. "The guest room has its own space heater if you need it." Eli watched as Ruby led their guests upstairs, noting how Mara kept one hand on Noah's shoulder, her movements measured and protective. The storm continued its assault outside, snow and wind, creating white walls of chaos beyond the windows. He pulled on his heavy coat and boots, stepping onto the covered porch where the generator hummed steadily. The bitter cold bit at his exposed skin as he checked the fuel levels and connections, making sure everything was secure. Through the falling snow, the security light cast long shadows across the yard, turning familiar shapes into strange silhouettes. Back inside, he could hear movement upstairs. Soft footsteps, running water. Ruby's voice explaining something about the temperamental hot water handle. Eli stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening to these temporary sounds of a fuller house, before reaching for the thermostat to adjust the heat for the night. "Everything okay with the generator?" Ruby asked, coming downstairs in her pajamas. "All set," Eli assured her. "Are our guests settled?" Noah fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Ruby paused, then added more quietly, "Dad, they seem kind of careful, don't they?" Eli considered his response carefully. "Sometimes people have good reasons to be careful, Ruby. We just need to be good neighbors while they're here." Ruby nodded, understanding in her eyes that sometimes made her seem older than her 14 years. "I'm going to bed. Night, Dad." "Night, sweetheart." Eli watched her head up the stairs, then made one final check of the doors and windows. The storm showed no signs of letting up, but inside, the house was warm and secure. He paused at the foot of the stairs, listening to the generator's steady hum competing with the wind's fury, before heading up to his own room for the night. Morning sunlight streamed through the frost-covered windows of the Carter farmhouse, casting delicate patterns across the hardwood floors. Eli shuffled down the hallway in his worn flannel robe, the rich scent of coffee guiding his steps. He'd woken early to make breakfast for their guests, golden pancakes and crispy bacon, a proper thank you for livening up what would have been another quiet evening alone with Ruby. He paused outside the guest room door, raising his knuckles to knock. The house felt different somehow, warmer despite the lingering chill from last night's storm. But when his hand made contact with the wood, the door swung open slightly. It hadn't been fully closed. "Miss Whitfield?" Eli called softly. "Breakfast is ready if you and Noah would like some." His voice trailed off as he stepped into the empty room. Sunlight poured through the curtains they'd drawn last night, illuminating a space that looked barely touched. The bed was made with military precision, corners tucked tight enough to bounce a quarter. Their guests' overnight bags were gone, along with any trace they'd been there at all. Almost any trace. On the crisp white pillow lay a single matte black business card. Eli picked it up, turning it over in his hands. The surface was smooth and expensive feeling, embossed with nothing but a silver W in an elegant script. Next to the bed, a bright yellow sticky note clung to the nightstand. "Call me," written in neat handwriting, followed by a phone number. "Dad?" Ruby's voice carried from the hallway. "Are they coming down for—" "Oh." She appeared in the doorway, already dressed for school in jeans and her favorite NASA sweatshirt. Her eyes went straight to the card in his hands. "Ooh!" She drew out the sound, a grin spreading across her face. "Mystery lady? Left you her number?" "It's not like that," Eli said quickly, but he could feel warmth creeping up his neck. "She probably just wants to arrange payment for the tow." Ruby rolled her eyes. "Right. Because people usually leave fancy black cards for their mechanic." She crossed the room and plucked the card from his fingers, examining it closely. "This thing looks expensive. And mysterious. Very mysterious." "Ruby Carter?" Eli said, trying to sound stern but failing to hide his smile. "Don't you have a math test to study for?" "Change the subject." Classic deflection technique. Ruby handed the card back with an exaggerated wink. "But fine, I'll leave you alone with your thoughts. And your very mysterious black card." She bounced out of the room, humming what sounded suspiciously like the theme from James Bond. Eli shook his head, looking down at the card again. The silver W caught the light, seeming to shimmer slightly. He carried it with him to the kitchen, propping it against the coffee pot while he packed Ruby's lunch. Every few minutes, his eyes drifted back to it. The number on the sticky note seemed to burn a hole in his pocket where he'd tucked it. "Just call already," Ruby said around a mouthful of pancake. "You're making me nervous with all that staring." "Eat your breakfast," Eli replied automatically, but he pulled out his phone and the sticky note. He stared at the number for a long moment, thumb hovering over the keypad. What was he expecting? What was he hoping for? The practical part of his brain insisted this was just about settling up the bill for services rendered. But another part, a part he thought had gone dormant years ago, wondered about the elegant black card and the careful handwriting. Taking a deep breath, Eli punched in the numbers and hit call. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. He was about to hang up when a crisp, professional voice answered, "Whitfield Foundation. How may I direct your call?" Eli's fingers trembled slightly as he held the phone to his ear. 1 ring, 2 rings. His free hand traced the raised silver W on the black card. "Whitfield Foundation. How may I direct your call?" The voice was crisp and professional. Eli cleared his throat. "Yes, I'm calling about—" He glanced at the sticky note again. "I have this number to call. From Mara?" "1 moment, please." Classical music filled the line. Ruby poked her head around the kitchen doorway, eyebrows raised in question. Eli gave a small shrug, still not sure what to make of any of this. "Eli?" Mara's warm voice came through clearly. "I'm so sorry we left without saying goodbye. Noah had an early doctor's appointment, and you all were sleeping so peacefully." "No problem at all. Just wanted to make sure you both got somewhere safe." "We did, thanks to you. That storm could have been dangerous if you hadn't stopped." There was a pause, then Mara continued, her tone shifting slightly. "Listen, I need to explain something, about who I am and why I was out there last night." Eli settled against the kitchen counter, watching snowmelt drip from the eaves outside. "I'm listening." "I'm the acting director of the Whitfield Foundation. We're a national philanthropy that focuses on community development, especially in rural areas." She took a breath. "That drive wasn't random. I've been looking at towns within a 100-mile radius, searching for the right place to launch a new initiative." Eli's mind raced back to their conversation last night, how carefully she'd asked about local businesses, about veterans in the area. "We're developing a pilot program," Mara continued, "aimed at supporting veteran-led small businesses. Training programs, mentorship opportunities, infrastructure improvements, but we need to be selective about where we start. The first location needs to have the right to heart." "And you're looking at Maple Hollow?" Eli tried to keep his voice steady, though his pulse had quickened. "I am. But I need someone on the ground, someone who really knows this place, to help me understand if it's viable." Someone who can assess the community's needs, honestly, without the politics that come once money's involved. She paused. Would you be willing to help me with that? Quietly, for now? Eli ran a hand over his face, thinking of the repairs his garage needed, of the kids who hung around after school hoping to learn about engines, of the veterans who came through town looking for work. The garage would be part of it? Mara added softly, if Maple Hollow proves to be the right fit, Carter's garage could become a training hub. We'd provide funding for expansion, equipment, apprenticeship programs. The possibility hit Eli like a physical force. He'd dreamed of something like this, turning his garage into more than just a place for oil changes and tire rotations. Making it somewhere people could learn, grow, build futures. He struggled to find words that wouldn't reveal how much his hands were shaking. I'd be honored to help assess things, but why me? Because in one evening, I watched how you handle a crisis, how you treat strangers, how you've raised your daughter. Those things tell me more than any proposal or committee meeting could. Her voice grew warmer. And because Noah hasn't stopped talking about your garage since we left. Eli couldn't help but smile at that. The boy had been fascinated by the tools visible through the office window when they'd first pulled in. What exactly would you need from me? Just observe. Take notes on which businesses might benefit from support, which veterans might be interested in mentoring, where the gaps are. We'll meet regularly to discuss what you find, but otherwise, keep it between us, for now. Politics can kill good ideas before they have a chance to prove themselves. I understand. And he did. He'd seen how fast gossip could spread in Maple Hollow, how quickly hope could turn to skepticism. Thank you, Eli. I'll have my assistant send you some initial documents to review, and, she hesitated. Thank you again for last night. It's been a long time since Noah felt that comfortable with someone new. After they said goodbye, Eli set the phone down carefully. The black card caught the morning light, its surface no longer mysterious, but full of promise. His fingers traced the embossed letter again, but this time they were steady. Ruby appeared at his elbow. Well, what did Mystery Lady want? Eli looked at his daughter, so bright, so ready to take on the world. He thought about what a program like this could mean for kids like her, for veterans struggling to find their footing, for a town that sometimes felt stuck in time. She wants my help with something, he said simply, tucking the card into his shirt pocket, right above his heart where, for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of real possibility. The bell above Dee's dinette door chimed as Eli stepped inside from the chilly spring morning. The familiar scent of coffee and fresh-baked pie wrapped around him like a warm blanket. A few regulars nodded his way as he scanned the red vinyl booths. Mara and Noah were already seated in a corner booth, a coloring book spread out between them. She wore a simple blue sweater today, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Noah's tongue poked out in concentration as he carefully filled in a dinosaur with green crayon. Morning, Eli said, sliding into the booth across from them. Mara's smile was warm but professional. Thanks for meeting us. I thought this might be better than my office in Columbus. Definitely more pie here, Eli agreed, making Noah giggle. Dee appeared at their table, coffee pot in hand. Her gray curls bounced as she sized up their group. Well, well. The mysterious SUV lady returns. She filled Eli's mug without asking. What can I get you folks? They ordered chocolate chip pancakes for Noah, omelets for the adults. As Dee walked away, Mara pulled out a leather portfolio. I've been thinking about how to approach this assessment, she said, opening to a page of neat notes. We need to understand what resources already exist for veterans here, what gaps need filling. Eli nodded, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. There's more need than most folks realize. Tom Wilson's trying to start a woodworking business but can't get funding. Sarah Chen, she served 2 tours, wants to open a therapy practice. Perfect examples. Mara jotted something down. Would you be willing to introduce me to them? Quietly, of course. Sure I can, Eli started, but Mara touched his arm. Noah, honey, stay where I can see you, she called. Her son had slipped from the booth and was wandering toward the counter where Dee was arranging pies. "I'm just looking," Noah called back, pressing his nose against the glass case. They returned to their discussion, heads bent over Mara's notes. She outlined potential programs, mentorship opportunities, small business grants, skills training. Eli found himself leaning forward, caught up in possibilities he hadn't dared imagine for years. "Excuse me," Mara said suddenly. "I should check on him." She walked to the counter where Noah was chatting with Dee. Eli watched them, something warm settling in his chest at how Mara knelt to Noah's level, listening intently to whatever story he was telling. The boy's small hands gestured animatedly. He didn't notice Noah break away until the child appeared at his elbow. Those solemn brown eyes studied Eli's face with surprising intensity for a 6-year-old. "Hi there, buddy," Eli said softly. Noah tilted his head, still staring. Then he turned toward Mara at the counter and said in that carrying whisper that only children seem to master, "Mommy says you're my daddy." The diner went absolutely silent. Even the sizzle of the grill seemed to pause. Eli felt the blood drain from his face. At the counter, Mara whirled around, her eyes wide with horror. "Oh no, sweetie, that's not," she started, hurrying over. "Noah, you misunderstood." But the damage was done. Eli could feel the weight of every stare in the place, particularly from the booth behind him, where Mayor Buckland sat with his morning paper. "I heard you talking on the phone," Noah continued innocently. "You said he felt like the daddy I should have had, all safe and nice that night in the snow." "Noah," Mara said sharply, then softened her tone. "Honey, that's not what I meant." "I'm so sorry, Eli. He must have overheard me talking to my sister about how kind you were during the storm." Silverware clinked as people pretended not to listen. Dee had stopped wiping the counter, her usual poker face slipping to show concern. "It's fine," Eli managed, though his throat felt tight. "Kids say things right?" But he could already hear the whispers starting. Mayor Buckland's coffee cup set down with deliberate slowness. "Maybe we should continue this another time," Mara said quietly, gathering their things with trembling hands. "Noah, get your crayons, please." Eli stood, fishing out his wallet. "Let me get this." "No, please," Mara said. "I've caused enough." She dropped a 20 on the table and took Noah's hand. "Come on, sweetie." They walked toward the door, the sound of their footsteps nearly drowned out by the growing murmur of conversation. Eli followed, hyper-aware of every eye tracking their exit. Just before they reached the door, he heard Mayor Buckland's voice carry clearly, "Well, well, isn't that interesting?" The bell chimed as they stepped out into the morning sunshine, but Eli could still feel those whispers following them through the glass. The steady rhythm of metal against metal filled Carter's garage as Eli worked beneath the hood of Mrs. Peterson's ancient Buick. The familiar scent of motor oil and the warmth from the space heater helped calm his churning thoughts about what had happened at the diner. Ruby sat at the worn desk in the corner, math textbook spread open, occasionally tapping her pencil against her teeth. "So?" Ruby's voice carried across the garage. "Everybody at school was talking today." Eli's wrench slipped, clanking against the engine block. He straightened up, wiping his hands on the red shop rag tucked in his belt. "About what happened at the diner?" "Yep," Ruby spun in the desk chair facing him. "Madison's mom was there. She texted everyone about it before first period." She raised an eyebrow. "What exactly did Noah say?" Eli leaned against the workbench, shoulders heavy. "It was just a misunderstanding, Ruby. Noah's a little kid who got confused." "Dad." Ruby's voice took on that teenager tone that meant she wasn't buying it. "Half the school thinks you have a secret family. The other half thinks you're dating some rich lady who's trying to take over the town." "Neither of those is true," Eli said firmly. "Ms. Whitfield runs a foundation that helps veterans start businesses, that's all." "But why was she here in the first place, in that storm?" "She was checking out different towns for their program. Got caught in the weather." He picked up a wrench, needed to keep his hands busy. "We helped them out. End of story." Ruby closed her textbook with a snap. "You know it's not, though. Not in Maple Hollow." She stood up, crossing her arms. "Remember when Mr. Jenkins got divorced? People talked about it for months. Or when Miss Caroline started dating that guy from Columbus? Ruby. I'm just saying, people here love to talk, and Mayor Buckland was right there when it happened. Before Eli could respond, a gentle knock echoed through the garage. Pastor Alma stood in the doorway, holding a covered pie dish, her silver hair catching the fluorescent lights. "Evening, you two," she said warmly. "Thought you might need some sustenance after today's excitement." Ruby hurried over to take the pie. "Is it your apple crumble?" "With extra cinnamon, just how you like it." Pastor Alma's eyes crinkled at the corners, but there was concern beneath her smile as she looked at Eli. "Mind if we chat for a minute?" Eli nodded, leading her to the small office while Ruby happily investigated the pie. Pastor Alma settled into the chair across from his desk, her practical winter boots leaving small puddles of melted snow on the concrete floor. "Harold Buckland's been busy," she said without preamble. Eli's jaw tightened. "Already?" "Called an impromptu council meeting this afternoon. Didn't officially mention you or Miss Whitfield, but," she shook her head. "Lot of talk about protecting our town's values and being careful about outside influences." "It was just a kid's mistake," Eli said, frustration edging his voice. "Oh, I know that, but Harold's good at turning simple things complicated when it suits him." Pastor Alma leaned forward, her dark eyes serious. "He's suggesting this foundation might be trying to change the character of Maple Hollow. By helping veterans start businesses?" Eli couldn't keep the edge from his voice. "By bringing in new ideas, new people." She paused. "Different people." The unspoken meaning hung in the air. Eli had heard enough coded language in his life to know exactly what Buckland was implying. "This pilot program could help a lot of folks," Eli said quietly. "Veterans who need a fresh start, kids who need training." "I know that too." Pastor Alma's voice was gentle. "But change makes some people nervous, especially people who benefit from things staying exactly as they are." Ruby appeared in the doorway, a slice of pie in her hand. "Is this about Mayor Buckland being weird at the diner?" Pastor Alma smiled. "Sharp as ever, Miss Ruby." "He was watching Dad and Miss Whitfield like they were doing something wrong," Ruby said, frowning. "But they were just talking about helping people." "Sometimes helping people makes others uncomfortable," Pastor Alma said, standing slowly, "especially when it means sharing power." She touched Eli's shoulder. "Just watch your step, Eli. And remember, you've got friends in this town too." After walking Pastor Alma to her car, Eli found himself on the front porch, watching fresh snow drift down in the glow of the porch light. The pie tin sat empty on the railing. Between Ruby and him, they'd finished it while talking about homework and normal things, trying to pretend the day's events hadn't shifted something fundamental in their small town's atmosphere. The snow fell silently, covering earlier tracks, making everything look clean and new. But underneath, Eli knew, the ground was still frozen, hard with old patterns and deep-set ways. He thought of Mara's foundation, of the opportunities it could bring, of the faces of local veterans who struggled to find their place after serving. Then he thought of Buckland's subtle warnings, of whispered gossip spreading through school hallways and church pews. One small misunderstanding, in a diner, and suddenly everything felt complicated. The warmth of helping strangers during a storm had turned into something else entirely. A choice between keeping the peace or standing up for change that might divide their town. Eli brushed snow off the railing, watching it disappear into the darkness below. The porch light caught each falling flake, making them glitter briefly before they joined the growing blanket of white. Somewhere in town, Buckland was probably on the phone right now, planting more seeds of doubt. And, somewhere else, maybe Mara was wondering if bringing her foundation's program to Maple Hollow was worth the trouble it seemed to be stirring up. The morning sun streamed through the library's tall windows, casting long shadows across the wooden table where Eli and Mara huddled over a large map of Maple Hollow. The smell of old books and furniture polish filled the air as they worked in comfortable silence, marking locations with colored pins. "Joe's Hardware right here," Eli said softly, pressing a red pin into the map. "Joe served 2 tours in Iraq, keeps it quiet though." Mara nodded, making a note in her leather-bound notebook. And he employs other veterans? 2. Both good men who needed a fresh start. Eli's finger traced along Main Street. Then there's Sarah's Bakery. She was Army Logistics. Makes the best cinnamon rolls you've ever tasted. I noticed quite a few empty storefronts too, Mara observed, placing blue pins to mark vacant spaces. Her shoulder brushed against Eli's as she leaned in, and he caught a hint of her lavender perfume. The old factory's the biggest one. Eli tapped the large building at the edge of town. Been closed almost 10 years now. Good bones, though. They spent the next hour mapping out possibilities, their heads bent close together over the table. Mara's practical questions showed she'd done her homework, but her genuine interest in the townspeople touched something in Eli's chest. Later that morning, they walked Main Street together, stopping first at Joe's Hardware. The bell chimed as they entered, and Joe looked up from behind the counter, his weather-worn face breaking into a smile. "Eli, what brings you by?" Joe's eyes flickered curiously to Mara. "Joe, this is Mara Whitfield. She's interested in our veteran community." Eli kept his voice casual, remembering their agreement to be discreet about the foundation for now. Joe's stance shifted slightly. The subtle change familiar to Eli from his own military days. "Marine Corps, 98-6, Joe said simply. "It's an honor to meet you," Mara replied with genuine warmth. She asked thoughtful questions about his transition to civilian life, his business challenges, what he wished he'd known starting out. By the time they left, Joe was showing them his idea notebook for expanding the store's training programs. "Young folks need to learn practical skills," he said earnestly. "But we need space, equipment." "You've given us a lot to think about," Mara said, shaking his hand. Their next stop was less encouraging. Bill at the auto parts store barely looked up from his newspaper, answering in grunts and making it clear he didn't want city folk telling him how to run things. "Don't take it personally," Eli said as they walked out. "Bill's like that with everyone new." "I'm used to skepticism," Mara replied. "Change is hard for established communities. That's why having trusted local partners is so important." They passed the diner, where several heads turned to watch them through the windows. Eli felt the weight of their stares but kept walking, pointing out the empty storefronts that could become workshops or training spaces. Meanwhile, across town at the high school, Ruby was showing Noah around the makerspace she'd helped set up. The 6-year-old's eyes went wide at the 3D printer whirring in the corner. "What's it making?" he whispered, pressing his nose against the clear casing. "A prototype for my science project," Ruby explained, pulling up a chair so he could see better. "Want to learn how it works?" Noah nodded eagerly. For the next hour, Ruby showed him how to use the basic design software, helping him create a simple robot figure. His face lit up when the printer started producing his design. "You're really good at explaining things," Noah said shyly as they waited. "Like how Mommy does when she teaches me stuff." Ruby felt a warm glow at the compliment. "Thanks, buddy. You're a pretty good student yourself." By late afternoon, Eli and Mara had made their way back to the Carter farmhouse. Ruby had texted that she was taking Noah to get ice cream, giving them time to review their notes over coffee in the kitchen. 23 veteran-owned businesses, Mara said, reviewing her notebook. Plus another dozen veterans working various jobs around town. That's significant for a community this size. Eli nodded, watching her hands move across the page. They were elegant hands, but he noticed a callus on her middle finger from writing "working hands." "The factory space has real potential," she continued. "High ceilings, good loading access, central location." She looked up, catching his gaze. "What are you thinking?" "Just." Eli paused, choosing his words carefully. "Appreciating how much thought you're putting into this, into understanding our town." Something softened in Mara's expression. "This matters to me. Getting it right matters." The late afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen windows, catching the silver threads in her dark hair. For a moment, neither spoke. The coffee maker gurgled softly. A car passed on the road outside. The distance between them at the kitchen table seemed both vast and microscopic. Mara's fingers tightened slightly around her coffee mug. Eli. The sound of a car door slamming made them both start. Moments later, Ruby and Noah burst through the door, carrying ice cream cones and chattering about their afternoon at the makerspace. Mom, look what Ruby helped me make. Noah pulled the little robot figure from his pocket, practically bouncing with excitement. Mara's face lit up as she examined his creation, but Eli noticed how she shifted her chair back slightly, putting more space between them. The moment, whatever it might have been, had passed. Yet, as they all gathered around the kitchen table, Noah demonstrating his robot while Ruby explained the design process, Eli couldn't help feeling that something had shifted today. In mapping out possibilities for the town's future, they'd started mapping something else too, something neither of them was quite ready to name. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in Maple Hollow High's cafeteria, now arranged with folding chairs for the monthly school board meeting. Eli sat near the back, his work boots still carrying traces of motor oil from a long day at the garage. He'd promised Ruby he'd attend to support her STEM night presentation, but something in Mayor Buckland's earlier smirk had put him on edge. Ruby stood at the podium, her braids swinging as she explained her vision for the event. We'll have interactive stations where kids can build simple robots, learn basic coding, and explore engineering concepts. Her voice rang clear and confident. Miss Thompson has already volunteered to supervise, and we've got 15 students signed up to run demonstrations. Several board members nodded approvingly, but Buckland cleared his throat from his seat at the center table. While I appreciate young Ruby's enthusiasm, he said, drawing out the word like taffy, I have concerns about recent outside influences affecting our school programs. The room grew still. Eli's hands tightened on his knees. What outside influences? Asked Mrs. Peterson, the science department head. Buckland adjusted his tie. Well, we've noticed increased activity from certain individuals who aren't long-term residents. People with their own agendas, pushing changes that might not fit our community's values. Ruby's shoulders stiffened. She knew exactly who he meant. The STEM night was my idea, she said firmly. I've been planning it since last semester. Of course, dear. Buckland smiled, all teeth and no warmth. But timing is everything. And with all these recent discussions about changes to our town's character, perhaps we should pause any new initiatives until we can ensure proper oversight. Eli watched his daughter's face fall, even as she held her chin high. The meeting continued, but he barely heard the rest, his pulse drumming in his ears. When they finally adjourned, he told Ruby to wait by the car. The parking lot was dark, except for pools of yellow light from tall lamps. Eli caught up to Buckland as he was unlocking his Mercedes. Harold, he called, keeping his voice steady. We need to talk about what just happened. Buckland turned, his politician's smile firmly in place. Eli, how's the garage? Business good? Let's not pretend this is a friendly chat. Eli planted his feet, hands loose at his sides. You tried to shut down my daughter's project because Mara Whitfield has been helping her with the planning. Now. Buckland raised his hands. I'm just looking out for the community's interests. We need to be careful about who we let influence our children. Careful about what exactly? Eli stepped closer, his voice low but intense. Because from where I stand, you're using a lot of fancy words to hide some ugly thinking. I don't know what you mean. But Buckland's smile had vanished. This town has a certain character, a way of doing things. Not everyone fits that mold. You mean not everyone looks right or comes from the right family? Eli felt the old anger rising but kept it contained, remembering his promise to Ruby about staying calm. My daughter deserves every opportunity, same as anyone else's child. And if you try to stand in her way because you're afraid of change, we're going to have a problem. Is that a threat, Carter? No, Harold. It's a promise to stand up for what's right. Eli held his gaze. Ruby's STEM night happens. And if you've got concerns about fit or character, maybe it's time to say what you really mean. Buckland's face flushed. He opened his car door with more force than necessary. You might want to think carefully about whose side you're on, Eli. This town has a long memory. I'm on the side of doing what's right, Eli replied. Always have been. He watched Buckland's taillights disappear, then walked back to where Ruby waited. She looked up from her phone. Everything okay, Dad? Just fine, baby. He squeezed her shoulder. Your STEM night is happening, no question. Later that evening, his phone buzzed with a text from Mara. Heard about what happened. Thank you for standing up to him. Not many would. Eli typed back, just did what needed doing. Still, it takes courage to face down prejudice with dignity. You're teaching Ruby an important lesson. Before he could respond, another call came through. Pastor Alma's number lighting up the screen. Eli, she said when he answered, her voice warm but determined. I've been hearing things. About the board meeting. About Buckland's behavior. About this whole situation. News travels fast, he sighed. In Maple Hollow, like lightning. She paused. I'm calling a town hall meeting at the church, next Sunday after services. If we're going to talk about change and community character, let's do it openly and honestly. Will you come? Eli thought about Ruby's face when Buckland tried to shut down her dream, about Mara's quiet determination to help veterans rebuild their lives, about his own silence in the face of injustice for too many years. I'll be there, he said firmly. Someone needs to speak truth. Good man, Pastor Alma replied. It's time we had some real conversations in this town. Change is coming whether Harold Buckland likes it or not. Better we face it together than let fear tear us apart. The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of First Presbyterian, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden floors. Ruby Carter moved between the rows of folding chairs, straightening each one with careful precision. The sound of metal scraping against wood echoed in the high-ceilinged sanctuary. A little to the left, honey, Dee called from the entrance, wheeling in a cart loaded with industrial coffee urns. We want everyone to see the pulpit clear as day. Her sensible shoes squeaked against the floor as she made her way to the fellowship hall kitchen. Eli worked near the front, setting up a projector screen while Pastor Alma arranged fresh flowers on the altar. The morning light caught the silver in her hair as she hummed an old hymn. The familiar scent of furniture polish and dried flowers filled the air, mixing with the rich aroma of Dee's coffee. Dad, what time is Mara getting here? Ruby asked, smoothing her cardigan. She'd insisted on wearing her serious clothes for the occasion. Soon, Eli replied, checking his watch. She wanted to review her presentation one more time. The door creaked open, and people began trickling in. Old Mr. Henderson, who'd served in Korea, took his usual spot in the third row. The Martinez family, whose daughter was currently deployed overseas, filled an entire pew. Even Mrs. Chen from the pharmacy showed up, carrying a tray of her famous almond cookies. Dee worked the room like a practiced politician, greeting everyone by name, making sure coffee cups stayed full. Sarah, how's that grandbaby of yours? She called to one woman. Jim, those new heart meds working out okay? To another. By 6 o'clock, the sanctuary was packed. Extra chairs lined the walls, and people stood in the back. The low hum of conversation filled the space, punctuated by occasional laughter and the clink of coffee cups. Pastor Alma stepped up to the pulpit, her presence commanding immediate attention. Welcome, friends and neighbors, she began, her voice warm and steady. We're here tonight to talk about community, about service, and about possibility. She introduced Mara, who walked to the front in a simple blue dress, her tablet in hand. Something in her stance changed as she faced the crowd. A quiet authority emerged, though her smile remained gentle. Thank you all for coming, Mara began. I'd like to start by sharing what brought me to Maple Hollow. She told the story of the snowstorm, of Eli's kindness, of how that one night revealed the heart of the town. That's the spirit this pilot program aims to support. The projector hummed to life as she outlined the details. Stipends for veteran entrepreneurs, apprenticeship programs, solar panels for community buildings, and the crown jewel, transforming the old factory into a veteran skill service center with Carter's Garage as a key training facility. Voices rose from the crowd as veterans began sharing their stories. Mr. Henderson spoke about coming home from Korea, how hard it was to find his footing. Mrs. Martinez read a letter from her daughter, describing her hopes for after her service ended. Then Pastor Alma mentioned Eli's tours in Afghanistan. The room grew quiet as all eyes turned to him. He stood slowly, clearing his throat. "I was lucky," he said simply. "When I came home, this town gave me space to heal, to rebuild. The garage became my anchor, but not everyone finds that. This program could help make sure they do." Applause broke out, spontaneous and genuine. Ruby beamed at her father from her seat, her eyes bright with pride. As the meeting wound down, people lingered in small groups, talking excitedly. The energy in the room had shifted from uncertainty to hope. Even some of the usual skeptics were nodding thoughtfully over their coffee cups. Dee cornered Eli near the cookie table. "Well, would you look at that?" she said, gesturing to the animated conversations around them. "Turns out people just needed to hear the whole story." Eli spotted Mara in the hallway gathering her things. He made his way over, wanting to thank her for how she'd handled the presentation. The overhead lights caught the silver pendant at her throat as she looked up at him. "That went well," he said softly. "Better than I hoped," she replied, stepping closer. The hall had emptied except for them. Something electric filled the space between them, a current of unspoken words. Eli leaned in slightly, drawn by the warmth in her eyes. Mara tilted her face up, her lips parting. "Dad," Ruby's voice echoed down the hall. "Pastor Alma needs help moving the projector screen." They stepped apart quickly, both trying to hide small smiles. "Coming," Eli called back, sharing one last look with Mara before heading toward his daughter's voice. Eli's phone buzzed on his nightstand, jolting him from sleep. The screen lit up with a string of news alerts, each one making his stomach sink further. The headline from the Midwest Community Chronicle glared at him: "Whitfield Heiress masquerades as small town savior." He sat up, rubbing his eyes as he clicked the link. The article loaded with a photo of Mara in an elegant evening gown at some charity gala, looking nothing like the woman who'd shared coffee in his kitchen. The writer had dug deep, outlining the Whitfield family's retail empire and their foundation's history of what they called reputation washing projects. His phone rang. Pastor Alma's name flashed on the screen. "You seen it?" she asked, without preamble. "Reading it now." Eli's eyes scanned the text. "Says here the Whitfields bought out struggling stores across 3 states last year." "Keep scrolling," Alma said grimly. "It gets worse." She was right. The comment section beneath the article had exploded overnight. Local usernames he recognized were sharing links to other stories, including one that made his hands shake. Carter's garage owner's violent past revealed. Someone had found the police report from 5 years ago, the night he'd gotten triggered at McGinty's bar when a motorcycle backfired. He'd thrown a punch, spent a night in jail, and done mandatory counseling. Sheriff Mills had kept it quiet, understanding about PTSD. But now it was all there, twisted into something ugly. "Unstable vet partners with wealthy outsider," Eli read aloud, his voice hollow. "Questions arise about judgment of Whitfield Foundation." "Don't read any more," Alma advised. "It's just feeding frenzy now." Ruby appeared in his doorway, still in her pajamas, clutching her phone. "Dad? Everyone's sharing these awful things about you and Mara." He patted the bed beside him. "Come here, baby." She curled up next to him like she used to when she was little. "Is it true? About Mara being rich?" "Seems so," he sighed. "But that doesn't make her a bad person." "And the bar fight?" "That's true too, but not the way they're telling it." He looked at his daughter. "Remember when we talked about my rough days after coming home? That was one of them. I got help. I'm better now." Ruby nodded against his shoulder. "I know, Dad." His phone buzzed again. Mara's number. "I have to take this," he said softly. Ruby squeezed his hand and slipped out. "Eli." Mara's voice was strained. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you everything up front." "Why didn't you?" A long pause. because for once, I wanted people to see me, not my family name, to judge the work on its own merits. She took a shaky breath. The Foundation Board is in emergency session. They're concerned about the optics. Optics? Eli repeated flatly. They're questioning my judgment, saying I let personal feelings compromise the selection process. Papers rustled in the background. And now with your history coming to light. My history. Heat crept into his voice. You mean when I was struggling with PTSD? The very thing this program is supposed to help other vets with? I know, it's completely hypocritical. She sounded close to tears. But if we don't handle this carefully, they'll pull the pilot completely. Eli stood, pacing his bedroom. So what does carefully mean? I need to step back from public appearances with you. No more meetings at the diner. No more walks down Main Street. Her voice dropped. We have to keep things strictly professional. The words hit him like a physical blow. You're worried about how it looks. I'm worried about saving the project, Mara countered. If we lose this funding, all those veterans we talked about helping get nothing. The training center doesn't happen. The apprenticeships disappear. Eli stopped at his window, watching early morning fog roll across his fields. She was right, and that made it worse. The board wants me to issue a statement, she continued, clarifying that our relationship is purely business, that my presence in your home during the storm was circumstantial, nothing more. He thought of Noah's small face studying his, of Ruby showing the boy her tools, of coffee shared in quiet moments between planning sessions, all reduced to circumstantial. What about Noah? He asked. He's made friends here, with Ruby. I know. The pain in her voice matched his own. But I have to think about his safety too. People are already making threats online. Eli's jaw clenched. He'd seen those comments too, the ones suggesting Mara was an unfit mother for exposing her son to dangerous elements. So that's it then? He said. We just pretend none of it happened? Just until things calm down. Until we can prove the pilot's legitimacy. She paused. I'm not giving up on Maple Hollow, Eli. Or on... She stopped herself. On the project. The unfinished thought hung between them. Eli pressed his forehead against the cool window glass. I understand, he said finally, though his chest ached with each word. You do what you need to do. Thank you. Her voice was barely a whisper. The Foundation's PR team will reach out about next steps. The line went dead. Eli stood there a long moment, phone still pressed to his ear, watching fog erase the familiar shapes of his world. Ruby's soft knock broke his trance. Dad? You okay? He turned to find his daughter in the doorway again, concern etched on her young face. Yeah, baby, I'm okay. Was that Mara? He nodded. Is she leaving? Not exactly. He tried to smile. Just taking a step back to protect the program. Ruby's expression darkened. That's not fair. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes life isn't about fair, he said quietly. Sometimes it's about doing what needs to be done. His phone pinged again. Another alert. Another story. Another piece of his and Mara's lives, dissected for public consumption. He turned off the notifications. The morning sun filtered through the garage windows as Eli worked under the hood of Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick. 3 days had passed since the article broke, and each one felt heavier than the last. His phone sat silent on the workbench, no text from Mara beyond brief updates about Foundation meetings. Ruby wandered into the garage after school, dropping her backpack by the door. She picked up a wrench and started organizing tools, their usual afternoon routine. But today, her movements were sharp, angry. Noah asked why we don't come to the makerspace anymore, she said, slamming a socket wrench into its drawer. I didn't know what to tell him. Eli straightened up, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Ruby? Miss Whitfield says it's better if we keep things professional for now. Ruby mimicked, her voice bitter. That's what you told me, right? Professional. She spat the word like it tasted bad. It's complicated, sweetheart. No, it's not. Ruby turned to face him, her eyes bright with hurt. You're letting them win. Just like you let those kids' parents win when they didn't want me in advanced math because I'd make their kids uncomfortable. Just like you let Mr. Peterson win when he said maybe we should sell the garage after Mom died. Eli's chest tightened. That's different. This project could help a lot of people. If we push too hard. Then what? Ruby demanded. The mean people might say mean things? Newsflash, Dad, they're already saying them. I saw what they wrote about your PTSD online. About how you're unstable. Her voice cracked. But you're not fighting back, you're just hiding. I'm trying to protect me? Ruby laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. I don't need protection, Dad. I need you to show me how to stand up for what's right. Isn't that what you always say? Do what's right, even when it's hard. Eli sat heavily on his work stool, the truth of her words hitting him like a physical blow. Ruby wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Mom would have fought, she said quietly. She never let anyone tell her to be smaller. The mention of Tessa, so rare from Ruby's lips, made Eli's throat tight. Before he could respond, Ruby grabbed her backpack and headed for the door. I'm going to Pastor Alma's to study, she called over her shoulder. At least she's not afraid to speak up. The door closed behind her with a decisive click, leaving Eli alone with the echoes of her words and the faint smell of motor oil. Hours later, after closing up the garage, Eli found himself on Pastor Alma's porch. She opened the door before he could knock, as if she'd been expecting him. Ruby's in the kitchen, helping me with dinner, she said, stepping aside to let him in. But first, you and I need to talk. She led him to her study, where family photos and service medals shared shelf space with well-worn Bibles. She settled into her favorite armchair, gesturing for Eli to take the couch. Your daughter's got a lot of her mama in her, Alma said, adjusting her reading glasses. That fire for justice? Pure Tessa. Eli smiled, despite himself. She told me I'm hiding. Are you? I'm trying to be strategic, he defended. If we push too hard, if I make waves. Then what? Alma interrupted, echoing Ruby's earlier challenge. The foundation might pull out? The town might talk? Eli Carter, when did you start letting fear of what might happen stop you from doing what needs doing? It's not that simple. Truth is always simple, Alma said firmly. It's our excuses that get complicated. She leaned forward, her eyes kind but unwavering. You know what I remember about Tessa? She used to say, silence in the face of wrong is just wrong, wearing better clothes. Eli's hands clenched in his lap. The project could help so many people, Pastor. Veterans who need a second chance, kids who need training. And it still can, Alma said. But not if we let fear write the rules. You think Jesus was worried about optics when he flipped those tables in the temple? Sometimes doing good means making noise. She stood up, walking to her desk to pull out a familiar black business card, identical to the one Mara had left on his pillow that first morning. Mara gave me this weeks ago, she said, turning it over in her hands. Said, if things got rough, I should remind her why she came here. Maybe it's time someone reminded her, and you, that real change doesn't come from playing it safe. Ruby's voice drifted in from the kitchen, humming something that sounded like one of Tessa's old hymns. The sound wrapped around Eli's heart like a familiar embrace. That night, lying in bed, Eli stared at the shadows playing across his ceiling. Ruby's words from earlier kept repeating in his mind. Mom would have fought. He could almost hear Tessa's laugh, see her shaking her head at his caution. He thought about the veterans in town who'd quietly approached him after the article broke, sharing their own stories of struggling to rebuild. About Noah's confused face when Ruby stopped coming to the makerspace. About Mara's eyes, tired but determined, even as she pulled away. Ruby was right. He'd been letting fear of what might happen override the certainty of what needed to be done. Somewhere between losing Tessa and raising Ruby alone, he'd gotten too comfortable with playing it safe. His daughter's voice echoed in his mind. Do what's right, even when it's hard. Sleep eluded him as the truth of those words settled into his bones. The evening choir practice had just finished at First Methodist when the crash shattered the stained glass window. Pastor Alma's hymnal thudded to the floor as shards of colored glass rained down on empty pews. Through the jagged hole, cold air rushed in, carrying bits of paper that fluttered like wounded birds. Eli, who had been changing oil in his truck across the street, sprinted toward the sound. His boots crunched on broken glass as he entered through the side door. "Everyone okay?" he called out. Pastor Alma stood frozen at the altar, her face pale in the dim light. "We're fine," she managed, though her voice shook. "But look." Near the broken window lay a brick wrapped in paper. Eli approached carefully, glass crackling under his feet. He unwrapped the note, his hands steady, even as his heart pounded. 5 words were scrawled in thick black marker. "Outsiders go home." "I'm calling the police," Pastor Alma said, already dialing. But Eli barely heard her. His mind raced to Mara and Noah, alone in their rental house on Oak Street. He pulled out his phone and typed quickly, "You okay?" "Something happened at church. Coming over." The response came immediately. "We're fine. Stay there. Police should document everything." He knew she was right, but it took all his willpower to remain in place as Sheriff Mills arrived, followed by 2 deputies. They took photos, collected the brick and note as evidence, and interviewed everyone present. Through it all, Eli kept checking his phone, relief flooding through him each time Mara confirmed they were safe. The next morning dawned gray and cold. Eli arrived early at Town Hall for the scheduled permit review, hoping to get ahead of any fallout from last night. But Mayor Buckland was already there, standing at the permit office counter with a stack of papers. "Morning, Carter," Buckland said, his tone falsely pleasant. "Quite a shame about the church window, isn't it?" "Cut the act, Harold," Eli replied quietly. "We both know what's happening here." Buckland's smile didn't waver. "What's happening is a mandatory review period for all new commercial permits. Safety first, you understand." He slid a form across the counter. "The training bay permit is suspended pending further investigation into community impact." Eli's fingers curled into fists at his sides, but he kept his voice level. "The impact would be jobs, training, hope for veterans who need a second chance. You know that." "What I know," Buckland said, leaning closer, "is that this town doesn't need the kind of attention it's getting lately, or the kind of people drawing that attention." Before Eli could respond, his phone buzzed, a text from Mara. "Need to see you, now." He found her pacing in her rental house living room 20 minutes later. Noah's toys were already packed in boxes, and suitcases stood by the door. Her hands shook as she held out her phone. "This came this morning," she said. The message was anonymous, sent through a contact form on the Foundation website. "Your boy sure likes that playground by the school. Shame if something happened while he was playing there. Take him and go." Eli's stomach clenched. "We'll get police protection, security cameras, whatever it takes." Mara shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I can't risk Noah, not even a small risk. He's all I have." "Mara, please." Eli stepped toward her, but she backed away. "I've already called the Foundation. They agree it's too volatile right now." She wiped her eyes. "The pilot program is frozen until there's community consensus," their words. "We're leaving within the hour." "Let me help you pack at least," Eli said, his voice rough. "No," Mara's tone was final. "Clean breaks are better. You know that." Noah appeared in the doorway then, clutching his favorite truck. "Are we going on another adventure, Mommy?" Mara's face crumpled for just a moment before she smoothed it into a smile. "Yes, baby. A new adventure." Eli knelt down to Noah's level. "Hey, buddy, you take care of your mom, okay?" Noah nodded solemnly, then surprised Eli with a fierce hug. "Bye, Mr. Carter." It took everything in Eli not to break down as he watched Mara load the last bag into her SUV. The sleet had started again, coating everything in a thin layer of ice. She paused before getting in, looking back at him standing on his porch. "I'm sorry," she said, her words nearly lost in the wind, "for all of it." Eli couldn't speak. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, as she drove away. The red taillights grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely into the curtain of sleet. The cold seeped through his jacket, but he barely felt it. He had stayed silent too long, played it safe, tried to keep the peace. And now Mara and Noah were gone, driven away by the very darkness he should have fought harder against. The porch step creaked as he sank down onto it, head in his hands, the weight of failure settling heavy on his shoulders. The sleet continued to fall, coating everything in ice, while inside his house, the black card with its silver W lay on his kitchen counter, a reminder of what could have been. Morning sunlight crept through the farmhouse windows, casting long shadows across the worn kitchen floor. Eli stood at the counter, mechanically measuring coffee grounds while the events of last night played on repeat in his mind: the shattering glass, Mara's tearful goodbye, the taillights disappearing into the sleet. The house felt emptier than it had in years. Ruby came downstairs in her school clothes, her usual morning chatter absent. She slid onto a kitchen stool, picking at the bowl of oatmeal Eli placed in front of her. "You okay, sweetheart?" Eli asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Ruby stirred her oatmeal, not meeting his eyes. "Noah texted me this morning. They're staying at his aunt's house in Cincinnati." She paused. "He's scared, Dad." Eli's hands tightened around his coffee mug. "I'm sorry, Ruby. I know you two were becoming friends." "It's not just that." Ruby's spoon clinked against the bowl. "The whole town's talking. At school yesterday, Tyler Buckland said his dad called us troublemakers, like we're the bad guys for wanting to help people." Eli sat down beside her, his breakfast untouched. "Sometimes people get scared of change, even good change." "But you're not doing anything about it," Ruby said, her voice small but sharp. "You're just letting them win." Before Eli could respond, a knock at the screen door made them both look up. Pastor Alma stood there, her gray hair slightly disheveled, holding a paper bag. "Brought you both some fresh muffins," she said, letting herself in, "though I suspect neither of you has much appetite this morning." Ruby grabbed her backpack. "I need to catch the bus." She hesitated at the door, then turned back. "Dad, remember when I was scared to do my science fair project because Jenny said it was stupid? You told me to stand up for what I believed in." Her eyes were bright with tears. "Maybe you should take your own advice." The screen door banged shut behind her. Eli stared after her, his chest tight. Pastor Alma settled into a kitchen chair, smoothing her cardigan. "Smart girl, you've got there." "She's hurting," Eli said. "They both are, Ruby and Noah, and Mara." He trailed off, unable to put words to the ache in his chest. Alma pulled out a muffin, breaking it in half. "And what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do? The mayor's got half the town convinced we're trying to destroy their way of life. Mara's gone. The foundation's probably pulling out." "A closed mouth is still a vote, Eli Carter." Alma's voice was gentle but firm. "Every time you stay silent when Buckland spreads his poison, you're voting for his side. Every time you let fear keep you quiet, you're teaching Ruby that's how to handle bullies." "I'm trying to protect her," Eli protested. "If I make waves—" "From what? From seeing her father stand up for what's right?" Alma shook her head. "I've known you since you came back from Afghanistan, son. You were broken then, but you rebuilt yourself. You raised that girl to be brave and true. Now, she needs to see you be the same." Eli pushed back from the table, pacing the kitchen. "It's not that simple." "No, it's not," Alma agreed. "Simple would be letting Buckland and his cronies chase away anyone different, anyone who might shake things up. Simple would be watching this town slowly die while good people do nothing." She stood up, straightening to her full height. "But you're not a simple man, Eli. You're a man who pulled strangers out of a storm, who's given more second chances than anyone I know, who sees the best in people, even when they don't see it in themselves." Eli stopped at the window, looking out at the garage where he'd first shown Noah how to use a wrench, where Ruby spent hours tinkering with her projects, where Mara had stood, explaining her vision for the future. "The church window," he said suddenly. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough, but windows can be fixed." Alma came to stand beside him. It's the broken trust that worries me more. This town used to take care of its own, all of its own. The Veterans Center could change lives, Eli said quietly. Not just here, but in every town they expand to. Training, jobs, hope. He turned to face Alma. But if I speak up at the council meeting tomorrow, then you'll be the man Ruby believes you are. The man Mara saw when she chose this town. Alma squeezed his arm. The man you already are, when you're not letting fear do your thinking for you. She gathered her purse, pausing at the door. Council meets at 7. I expect I'll see you there. Eli sat back down at the kitchen table, sunlight warming his shoulders. The house was quiet, but for the first time since last night, the silence didn't feel like defeat. It felt like the pause before a decision. He pulled out his phone, looking at the last text from Mara. I'm sorry, I have to protect Noah. His thumb hovered over the keys. Then he set the phone down and reached instead for the black business card he'd kept in his wallet. The silver W caught the light as he turned it over in his hands. The morning stretched on as Eli sat there, remembering Ruby's words about being the dad she needed him to be. Remembering Noah's small hands on the wrench, his face lighting up with pride. Remembering Mara's vision of what their town could become. His resolve hardened like steel being tempered. Tomorrow, at the council meeting, he would finally break his silence. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through Carter's garage as Eli wiped his hands on a shop rag, staring at the black business card on his workbench. He'd memorized the number by now, but his fingers still traced the silver-embossed W before he picked up his phone. His heart pounded as the line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Whitfield Foundation, the familiar voice of Mara's assistant answered. I need to speak with Mara, please. It's Eli Carter. A pause. One moment, Mr. Carter. The shop fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Then her voice came through, professional but strained. Eli, I'm speaking at the council meeting tomorrow night, he said firmly, cutting off what he suspected would be another careful withdrawal. Whether you're here or not. The line went quiet for so long he checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, Mara spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Eli, they threatened Noah. I know, and that's exactly why we can't let them win. He leaned against his tool cabinet, choosing his words carefully. Running doesn't stop people like this, Mara. It just teaches them that threats work. It's not that simple. Actually, it is. Eli's voice grew stronger. My daddy taught me something before he died. Son, there are times when doing right isn't just about you anymore. This is one of those times. He heard her sharp intake of breath. What are you planning? I'm calling every veteran I know in 3 counties, asking them to come in uniform, show this town what real service looks like. He paused. And Dee's got something planned too. Dee? There was a note of surprise in Mara's voice. What's she doing? Says she's kept every IOU from folks I've helped over the years. Times I fixed their cars for free when they couldn't pay, or towed them home in storms. He shook his head. I told her to forget those debts, but she's Dee. She remembers everything. She wants to read them at the meeting. Yeah. Says it's time people remember who their real neighbors are. The silence that followed felt different this time, thoughtful rather than fearful. Eli could almost see Mara's expression, the way she got when she was turning over a problem in her mind. I can't bring Noah back yet, she said finally, not until I know it's safe. I understand that, but you don't have to hide either. Another pause. Let me think about it. After they hung up, Eli started making calls. First to Jake Matthews, who'd served with him in Afghanistan and now ran the VFW 2 towns over. Then to Sam Wilson, who maintained the county's emergency vehicles. To Maria Gonzalez, who'd done 3 tours before opening her own garage in Columbus. One by one, they agreed to come, to stand, to remember what service really meant. Around 4 o'clock, the bell above the shop door chimed. Dee walked in, carrying her ancient leather ledger book. Found every single one, she announced, patting the worn cover. Dating back to when you first took over this place from your daddy. Eli wiped his hands again, embarrassed. "Dee, you don't have to." "Harrison Miller, 3 years ago," she cut him off, opening to a marked page. "Transmission went out on his delivery van. You fixed it for free because his wife was in the hospital." She flipped to another page. "Sarah Chen, last winter. Car died on Route 23 at midnight. You towed her home, wouldn't take a dime, because she was 8 months pregnant. Those folks needed help, that's all." Dee snapped the book shut. "And now you need help. That's how community works, Eli Carter. You just been too busy giving to notice when it's your turn to receive." She tucked the ledger under her arm. 7 o'clock tomorrow night. I'll be there early. Make sure they give me time to speak." After closing up the shop, Eli drove home in the gathering dusk. Ruby was at the kitchen table doing homework, and she looked up when he came in. "Did you call her?" she asked. "I did." He squeezed her shoulder as he passed. "Got some other calls to make too, but first I need to get something ready for tomorrow." Upstairs in his bedroom, Eli opened his closet and pulled out the garment bag that held his only suit. The dark blue fabric was a little dusty. He hadn't worn it since Tessa's funeral, but otherwise intact. He set up the ironing board, taking care with each crease, each lapel. The familiar motions brought back memories of his father teaching him how to press his first uniform. "Appearance matters, son," he'd said. "Shows respect for yourself and others." When the suit was pressed, Eli opened his dresser drawer and carefully lifted out the small wooden box that held his medals. He laid them on the dresser one by one: the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal. Each one caught the light differently, telling its own story of service and sacrifice. The medals would stay home tomorrow. This wasn't about showing off, but looking at them reminded him why he'd served in the first place: to protect, to stand up, to make things better, even when it was hard. The suit hung ready on the closet door, a quiet statement of intent. Tomorrow would be about choices, not just his, but the whole town's. About who they wanted to be and what they were willing to stand for. Through his window, Eli could see lights coming on across Maple Hollow as evening settled in. Each one represented a family, a story, a piece of the community that had shaped him, that had shaped Ruby. That could shape Noah too, if they got this right. He needed to make a few more calls before bed. But first, he took a moment to run his hand over the freshly pressed suit, feeling the smooth fabric beneath his fingers. Tomorrow would be about truth, about courage, about doing what was right not just for himself, but for everyone who called this town home. The town hall's wooden benches groaned under the weight of what seemed like half of Maple Hollow. Bodies packed the narrow rows, with more people standing along the walls, their winter coats still dusted with snow. The air felt thick with tension and the lingering scent of wet wool. Mayor Buckland stood at the podium, his silver hair catching the fluorescent lights. His practiced smile never wavered as he adjusted his tie. "As we begin tonight's proceedings regarding the proposed changes to our zoning ordinances." From his seat in the third row, Eli could feel Ruby's hand squeeze his arm. She'd insisted on wearing her best dress, dark blue with tiny white flowers, telling him, "We dress up for important things, Dad." Now she sat straight-backed beside him, chin lifted, just like her mother used to do when standing her ground. Pastor Alma caught his eye from across the aisle and gave a slight nod. 2 rows behind her, Dee had positioned herself strategically near some of the town's most vocal critics, her expression daring them to start something. "And now," Buckland continued, his voice smooth as creek ice, "we'll hear public comments regarding the proposed Carter's Garage expansion project. Please keep remarks brief, and I'll speak first." Eli stood, his voice carrying clear and steady across the room. Heads turned, whispers rippled. He made his way to the center aisle, conscious of every creaking floorboard under his dress shoes. The podium felt both too close and miles away. His military medals clinked softly against his chest as he walked, pinned carefully to his only suit jacket. The same medals he'd earned in Afghanistan. The same suit he'd worn to Tessa's funeral. "Most of you know me," Eli began, his hands resting lightly on the podium edges. I fix your cars, jump, start your batteries when winter catches you off guard. Some of you trusted me with your keys before you trusted me with much else. A few uncomfortable shifts in the audience. He continued, What some of you don't know is that when I came back from my third tour, I couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop checking windows, counting exits. One night, at Jimmy's bar, a truck backfired and He paused, swallowing hard. I put my fist through a wall. Could have been worse. Should have been worse. The room had gone absolutely still. Even Buckland's practiced smile had slipped. But this town gave me a second chance. Pete at the hardware store hired me part-time until my hands stopped shaking. Doc Miller found me a counselor who worked on sliding scale. And when Tessa, his voice caught, Ruby's eyes shone with tears in the third row. When I lost Tessa, you brought casseroles for weeks, helped with Ruby, showed up. He straightened his shoulders. That's the Maple Hollow I know. The one that shows up, not the one that throws bricks through church windows. A sharp intake of breath from several corners. Buckland shifted uncomfortably at his seat. Now we've got a chance to be that town again, to help other veterans find their way back, to teach kids like Ruby that a small town doesn't have to mean small dreams. From her strategic position, Dee stood up, a stack of papers in her hands. Speaking of showing up, she called out, her voice cutting through a murmur of dissent, I've got some receipts here, 20 years of them. Tommy Jenkins, remember when your truck died during harvest? Eli worked through the night, told you to pay when you could. Tommy's weather-worn face reddened. Never did send me a bill, he admitted gruffly. Sarah Miller, Dee continued, that time your daughter's car broke down on her way to college interviews? Eli fixed it for parts cost only. And you, Frank Matthews, don't. You shake your head at me when your shop nearly went under during COVID, who kept your delivery van running on credit? The whispers changed tone. Behind Eli, the back door opened. Heavy boots sounded on the wooden floor. He turned to see uniformed veterans filing in silently from Maple Hollow, from neighboring counties, some he recognized from support groups. They lined up behind him, parade rests straight, medals glinting. A month ago, Eli said into the hushed room, a snowstorm brought two strangers to my door. I could have driven past those hazard lights, could have said the tow truck was busy. But that's not who we are in Maple Hollow. He looked directly at Buckland. At least, it's not who we used to be. The question tonight isn't about zoning laws or training bays. It's about who we want to be going forward. A town that throws bricks? Or a town that builds bridges? Ruby was crying openly now, pride shining through her tears. Pastor Alma reached across the aisle to hold her hand. The Foundation's offer isn't charity. Eli continued. It's investment in our kids, our veterans, our future. But more than that, it's a mirror, showing us exactly who we are when opportunity knocks. He stepped back from the podium, standing tall among his fellow veterans. The silence in the room felt electric, heavy with choice. Mayor Buckland cleared his throat, shuffling papers. The Council will now vote on Ordinance Amendment 2024-7 regarding the proposed expansion of Carter's Garage into a veterans training facility. The Council chamber fell silent as the vote tally was counted. Eli's heart pounded against his ribcage as he watched each council member raise their hand. Ruby gripped his arm tighter with each "aye" that echoed through the room. Motion passes, 7-2, announced the council secretary, her voice steady and clear. A collective breath seemed to release from the crowd. Veterans in their pressed uniforms nodded in quiet satisfaction. Dee wiped tears from her eyes with her apron corner, and Pastor Alma's face broke into a wide smile. Mayor Buckland's practiced politician's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine surprise. He cleared his throat and straightened his tie before approaching Eli. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his face as he extended his hand. Mr. Carter, Buckland said, his voice carrying in the quiet room, it appears I may have misjudged certain matters. The town will proceed with the permits for the training bay. He paused, jaw working. I apologize for any unpleasantness. Eli accepted the handshake, noting how the mayor's grip was neither too firm nor too weak, calculated like everything else about him. "Thank you, Mayor. I look forward to working together for the good of Maple Hollow." The crowd began to disperse, their conversations a low murmur of excitement and speculation. Ruby hugged her father tight, whispering, "You did it, Dad." As the evening wore on, Eli found himself standing in front of the church, gazing up at the newly repaired window. The March wind still carried a winter bite, but the stars shone clear and bright above. The sound of footsteps on frozen gravel made him turn. Mara stood there, her coat unbuttoned despite the cold, cheeks flushed from the night air. Noah wasn't with her, probably with a sitter, Eli thought. She looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable than he remembered, but her eyes held the same quiet strength. "I heard about the vote," she said softly. "Pastor Alma called me." "Where's Noah?" Eli asked, his voice gentle. "With my sister in Columbus." Mara took a step closer. "I got in my car the moment I heard. I needed to be here." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a familiar matte black card. But this one was different. Freshly engraved with silver letters that caught the starlight, "Maple Hollow Pilot." "I had this made last week," she admitted, holding it out to him. "Then I got scared and ran. The foundation board was pressuring me about optics and that threat about Noah." Her voice wavered. "But watching you stand up tonight, hearing how you faced everything head-on, I realized I was wrong to leave." Eli took the card, running his thumb over the raised letters. "Fear's a natural response," he said quietly. "I've felt plenty of it myself. But you stayed." Mara's eyes glistened. "You fought for what mattered. I had good teachers." He glanced toward home, thinking of Ruby's quiet strength. "Sometimes our kids show us how to be brave." Mara moved closer, close enough that he could see the slight tremor in her hands. "I'm asking for a second chance, Eli. Not just for the project, but," she gestured between them, "for this, whatever this might be." The repaired church window glowed softly above them, its colored glass casting gentle shadows on the snow. Eli thought about that first night of the storm, about taking chances and opening doors. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and certain. Their eyes met in the starlight, and this time neither of them pulled back. Eli's hand found her waist as Mara stepped into him. Their first kiss was soft, tentative, then sure, full of promise and possibility. The March wind swirled around them, but neither felt the cold. The colored light from the window wrapped around them like a blessing, and for a moment, everything else fell away. The town, the project, the past. They were just two people who had found each other in a storm, finally allowing themselves to stay. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Eli and Mara walked side by side, their footsteps matching in an easy rhythm. The spring air held a crisp sweetness, making the familiar storefronts look brighter somehow. "So the training bay will need at least 6 workstations," Eli said, gesturing with his coffee cup. "And we'll want to make sure there's enough space between them for wheelchairs." Mara nodded, making notes on her tablet. "What about the tools? We should probably start with basic sets and add specialty equipment as needed." "I've been thinking about that," Eli said. "Some of our older vets have trouble with standard wrenches. Ruby's been working on modified handles using the school's 3D printer." They paused outside Pete's Hardware, where a bell jingled cheerfully as they entered. Pete looked up from behind the counter, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Well, if it isn't our town's newest power couple," he said with a wink, "what can I do for you this fine morning?" Mara pulled out a folder while Eli explained, "We're here to talk about apprenticeships, Pete. The foundation can provide stipends for veterans who want to learn the hardware business." Pete's eyes lit up. "You mean like Jimmy's boy? He came back from overseas last year, been helping out part-time while he figures things out." "Exactly like that," Mara said warmly. "We'd cover his training, and you'd teach him the ropes of running a small business." As they worked out the details, customers came and went, each one stopping to offer congratulations or ask questions about the program. The tension that had filled the town just days ago seemed to have evaporated like morning dew. At Dee's dinette, they found Ruby and Noah huddled in a booth, surrounded by colored markers and large sheets of paper. Noah's tongue stuck out in concentration as he carefully drew what looked like a robot. "What are you two up to?" Mara asked, sliding into the booth beside her son. Ruby held up a sketch proudly. "We're designing posters for the grand opening. Noah had the idea to make it like a fair, with different stations where people can try things." "Look, Mommy," Noah pointed to his drawing. "This robot helps fix cars when someone's arms get tired." Eli smiled, remembering his conversation with Pete. "That's actually not far off from what we're trying to do, buddy." They spent lunch reviewing Ruby and Noah's ideas, which ranged from practical to fantastical. Dee brought over extra napkins for Noah to draw on, along with a plate of her famous cookies for the planning committee. After lunch, they visited 3 more businesses: Sarah's bookstore, where they discussed computer training programs; Mike's Auto Parts, which agreed to supply discounted inventory; and the local credit union, which offered financial literacy workshops. By mid-afternoon, they had 6 signed partnership agreements and a growing list of interested veterans. Ruby texted that she and Noah were heading to the garage to work on their secret project. "Should we be worried?" Mara asked as they walked toward Carter's garage. Eli chuckled. "With those two? Probably. But Ruby's got a good head on her shoulders when it comes to safety." The garage door was open, letting in the afternoon light. Inside, Ruby stood at her workbench, carefully sanding something while Noah watched from a safe distance, safety goggles almost too big for his face. "Can we see it yet?" Mara called out. Ruby looked up, grinning. "Perfect timing. We just finished." She picked up what looked like a wrench, but with an unusual handle. "This is for Mr. Johnson. His arthritis makes it hard to grip regular tools." Eli took the wrench, testing its weight. The handle was slightly larger than normal, with gentle curves that fit naturally in his palm. The surface had a textured pattern that provided extra grip. "Ruby designed it herself," Noah announced proudly. "I helped pick the colors." Mara examined the tool carefully. "This is incredible, Ruby. How many of these could you make? With the new 3D printer the Foundation's donating? Tons." Ruby's eyes sparkled with excitement. "And we can customize them for different needs. Noah's been taking notes when veterans visit. He's really good at noticing how they move differently." Noah beamed at the praise. "Like how Ms. Rodriguez uses her left hand more, even though she's right-handed. We could make special tools just for her." Eli watched as Mara hugged her son, feeling a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. This was what healing looked like, not just fixing engines, but fixing lives, one small tool at a time. As Ruby demonstrated the wrench's features, Eli caught Mara's eye. She smiled, and he knew she was thinking the same thing. Their 2 families, once strangers brought together by a storm, were building something even stronger than they'd imagined. The old factory building stood like a sleeping giant at the edge of Maple Hollow, its brick walls weathered but solid. Early morning light streamed through the freshly cleaned windows, catching dust motes that danced in the air. The sharp scent of pine cleaner mixed with the musty remnants of decades past. Eli pushed open the heavy metal door, and a wave of volunteers streamed in behind him. Ruby led a group of teenagers carrying cleaning supplies, while Pastor Alma directed traffic with the authority of a seasoned choir conductor. The cavernous space echoed with footsteps and excited chatter. "All right, folks," Eli called out, his voice bouncing off the high ceiling. "Let's start with those walls. They've got 50 years of grime to scrub off." The volunteers spread out across the space, armed with scrub brushes and determination. Even Mayor Buckland showed up, looking uncomfortable in old jeans, but grabbing a brush without complaint. His presence seemed to ease the last bits of tension hanging in the air. Mara moved through the crowd, stopping to chat with different groups. She'd traded her usual business attire for work clothes, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Noah trailed behind her with a tiny spray bottle, diligently cleaning the baseboards. "You know what this place needs?" Dee's voice rang out as she bustled through the door, pushing a cart laden with coffee urns and pastry boxes. a proper fuel station for these hard workers. The smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls drew people like magnets. Dee set up her makeshift cafe in a corner, creating an instant gathering spot where former skeptics and early supporters found themselves sharing donuts and conversation. "Remember when this place was the shoe factory?" Old Mr. Peterson mused, dunking his donut in coffee. "My father worked the line for 30 years. "Well, now it's going to help a new generation," Pastor Alma said, accepting a steaming cup from Dee. "Different kind of work, same spirit of community." Throughout the morning, more townspeople trickled in. The hardware store owner arrived with donated supplies. The quilting circle showed up with handmade curtains for the office windows. Even the high school shop teacher came by, offering to help design the training stations. By early afternoon, the transformation was becoming visible. Clean walls revealed the building's good bones. Volunteers hung insulation while others assembled sturdy workbenches. The space began to feel less like an abandoned relic and more like a promise taking shape. Ruby and her friends had taken over one corner, setting up what would become the computer learning station. Their laughter mixed with the sounds of construction, creating a symphony of renewal. "Look what we found in the old office," one of the teens called out, carefully carrying a framed black and white photograph. It showed the factory in its heyday. Workers posed proudly outside these same brick walls. "That's going up on the wall," Eli decided, already picturing where it would hang. "Right next to where we'll put pictures of our first graduating class." Pastor Alma gathered everyone around 3 o'clock, her voice cutting through the busy noise. "Let's take a moment to bless this space," she said, raising her hands. The room fell silent, even the teenagers stilling their restless energy. "Lord," she began, her words warm and clear, "bless these walls that will shelter new beginnings. Bless these hands that work to make dreams real. And bless the hearts that opened to make this possible." A chorus of amens followed, some quiet, some emphatic, all sincere. As evening approached, the volunteers began trickling out, tired but satisfied. Dee packed up her empty coffee urns, accepting hugs and compliments on her cinnamon rolls. The setting sun painted the cleaned windows in amber light, casting long shadows across the newly organized space. Finally, only Eli and Mara remained. They stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the day's progress. Workbenches lined one wall, their fresh wood gleaming. Tools hung in neat rows, waiting to be used. The computer station stood ready, screens dark but full of potential. Eli flipped on the new overhead lights, and the space came alive with warm illumination. Every clean surface, every carefully arranged tool, every thoughtfully planned station spoke of possibility. Through the windows, they could see their reflection overlaid against the darkening sky, standing shoulder to shoulder in the bright interior. "Ready to lock up?" Mara asked softly, not wanting to break the peaceful moment. Eli nodded, taking in the sight of their shared vision becoming reality. The keys jingled in his hand as they stood there, admiring the transformed space that glowed like a beacon in the gathering dusk. The morning sun painted Maple Hollow's Main Street in soft golden light. A crisp spring breeze carried the sound of hammering and the whir of power tools from the old factory building. Inside the high school gym, Ruby Carter stood on a stepladder, directing her STEM club teammates as they hung banners announcing next week's grand opening celebration. "A little higher on the left, Marcus," Ruby called out, squinting at the slightly crooked "Welcome to the Future of Maple Hollow" banner. "We want it perfect for the launch." Down in the factory, Eli moved methodically through the training bay, checking each piece of equipment with practiced hands. He ran his palm along the smooth surface of a newly installed hydraulic lift, remembering how different things had looked just a month ago. The concrete floor, once stained and cracked, now gleamed with fresh epoxy coating. Overhead LED lights replaced the old fluorescent fixtures, bathing everything in clean, bright light. Mara sat at a folding table near the entrance, surrounded by stacks of papers. She pushed her reading glasses up her nose as she reviewed the final grant documents. Her foundation's logo, that familiar silver W, now shared space with Veteran Skill Service Center on the building's facade. "How's the paperwork coming?" Eli asked, wiping his hands on a shop rag as he approached her table. Mara looked up with a tired smile. Almost there. Legal just sent the last apprenticeship agreements. She stretched, rolling her shoulders. Who knew changing a town could involve so many signatures? At least the hard part's done, Eli said, pulling up a chair beside her. Getting people to believe in it. In the church office across town, Pastor Alma sat at her desk, reading glasses perched on the end of her nose as she worked on her dedication speech. Pictures of veteran families lined her walls, decades of ceremonies, deployments, and homecomings. She paused in her writing to look at them, these faces that told Maple Hollow's story of service and sacrifice. Lord, she murmured, help me find the right words. Back at the high school, Ruby and her team had moved on to setting up demonstration stations. She checked items off her list. 3D printer, ready. Robot arm prototype, assembled. Solar panel display, positioned by the window. Hey Dad, she called out as Eli stopped by to check on her progress. Want to see what we're showing the elementary kids? She guided him to a table where a small engine sat partially disassembled. We're teaching basic mechanics, you know, start them young. Eli squeezed her shoulder, pride warming his chest. Look at you, already training the next generation. Dee's dinette buzzed with activity as volunteers came and went, fueled by endless coffee and Dee's famous cinnamon rolls. The diner had become command central for the opening preparations, its windows covered with schedules and sign-up sheets. More coffee, Pastor? Dee called out as Alma walked in, speech notes in hand. Please, Alma nodded, sliding into her usual booth. And maybe some inspiration while you're at it. Coming right up, Dee winked, already reaching for the pot. Though from what I hear, you've got plenty to work with. This town's got stories enough to fill a book. By late afternoon, Mara had finally signed the last document. She stretched her arms overhead, feeling the satisfaction of completion. Through the training bay windows, she could see Eli teaching two young veterans how to calibrate the new diagnostic equipment. His patience and quiet confidence made something in her chest tighten with affection. The sun was setting when Eli and Mara finally took a break, settling into a quiet corner booth at Dee's. Steam rose from their coffee cups as they watched the last golden light fade from Main Street. The diner had emptied out, leaving them in peaceful semi-privacy. 1 week, Mara said softly, wrapping her hands around her mug. Sometimes I still can't believe we're here. Eli nodded, understanding in his eyes. From that snowstorm to this, who'd have thought? They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from having weathered storms together. Through the window, they could see the lit-up factory windows glowing like a beacon at the edge of town. The sight filled them both with quiet confidence. Not just in the project, but in each other, in the town, in the possibility of change born from trust and persistence. Eli's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the sparking electrical panel. 2 days before the grand opening, and the main power system for the training bay's diagnostic equipment was failing. Smoke curled from behind the metal box, carrying the acrid smell of burning wires. This isn't good, he muttered, reaching for his phone. Ruby looked up from where she'd been arranging tool sets, her eyes widening at the sight of the smoke. Dad, what's happening? The whole system's fried. Must have been a surge from the old wiring we didn't catch. Eli ran a hand through his hair, mental calculations racing. This could set us back weeks. Ruby's face set in determination. No way. We didn't come this far to let a bunch of wires stop us. She pulled out her phone and started typing rapidly. I'm texting the STEM club. Marcus's mom is an electrician. Within 30 minutes, the empty training bay filled with concerned voices. Sarah Martinez, Marcus's mother, was already examining the panel with professional scrutiny. 3 other local electricians had shown up after hearing through the town's grapevine. They huddled around the smoking box, speaking in technical terms. The old factory's wiring is the real problem, Sarah explained, pointing to corroded connections. We need to replace this entire section before it's safe. Mara arrived, looking worried but composed. Whatever it costs, the foundation will cover it. But can we get the parts in time? Already handled, came a gruff voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Joe Thompson, owner of the hardware store. The Vietnam veteran stood with his arms crossed, a hint of a smile under his mustache. "Called my supplier in Columbus. They're sending a truck tonight, no charge." The room buzzed with activity as more people arrived. Veterans in their work clothes, teenagers with paintbrushes, townspeople carrying tools and supplies. Pastor Alma set up a coffee station in the corner, while Dee from the diner arrived with boxes of sandwiches. Ruby organized her STEM club friends into painting crews. "The walls need refreshing anyway," she declared, directing teams to different sections. "We'll make it look brand new while they fix the wiring." The afternoon turned to evening, but nobody left. Under Sarah's direction, the electricians worked methodically, replacing section after section of old wiring. Veterans with technical training pitched in, their military precision showing in how efficiently they moved through tasks. Young Noah sat at a folding table, carefully sorting screws and washers into containers, his small face serious with concentration. Mara watched him from where she helped Ruby's team paint, pride showing in her eyes. "This is what community looks like," Pastor Alma said softly to Eli as she handed him a coffee. "When people choose to show up for each other." Even Mayor Buckland made an appearance, awkwardly offering his personal generator, just in case. Eli accepted with a nod, their previous tensions fading in the face of shared purpose. The parts truck arrived just before midnight. Joe directed the unloading with military efficiency, creating a supply line that moved everything inside within minutes. The electrical team dove back in with renewed energy. Ruby's painting crews had transformed the walls. Fresh pale gray paint brightened the space, with accent walls in the deep blue of the Veterans Center logo. Some of the art students had added subtle designs that looked like tool silhouettes along the borders. "Looking good, kiddo," Eli said, squeezing Ruby's shoulder. She beamed, paint splattered across her cheek. "We're adding clear coat next," she explained. "It'll be totally dry by morning." Around 3 a.m., Sarah closed the new electrical panel with a satisfying click. "Ready for testing," she announced. The room held its breath as Eli threw the main switch. Lights hummed to life. Diagnostic machines booted up smoothly. The new ventilation system purred. A spontaneous cheer erupted, echoing off the freshly painted walls. Dawn crept in through the high windows, casting long rays across the training bay. The night crew had slowly trickled home, leaving just the core team to admire their work. The paint was nearly dry, giving off that clean new room smell. Every machine gleamed, ready for the first class of veteran trainees. Ruby yawned, leaning against her father's side. "We did it," she mumbled sleepily. Eli looked around the space, at the fresh paint, the new wiring, the carefully arranged tools. But more than that, he saw the evidence of an entire town choosing to come together. Hardware store receipts marked "no charge." Empty coffee cups and sandwich wrappers. Paintbrushes cleaned and neatly stored. "The place looks better than we planned," Mara said, coming to stand beside them. Noah had fallen asleep on a stack of clean drop cloths, clutching his container of perfectly sorted screws. Through the windows they could see the sunrise painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The morning light caught the fresh paint, making the walls glow. In a few hours, the space would fill again with inspectors and final preparation teams. But for now, in this quiet moment, they savored the proof of what their community could do when it mattered. Morning sunlight streamed through Eli's bedroom window, carrying with it the sweet promise of spring. The harsh winter that had brought Mara and Noah into their lives seemed like a distant memory now. Before his alarm could sound, rapid footsteps thundered down the hallway. "Dad! Dad! Wake up!" Ruby burst through his door, already dressed in her favorite navy blazer and crisp white shirt. Her hair was neatly braided, and she practically vibrated with excitement. "The sun's up, and Mrs. D just texted. She's already setting up the food tables." Eli sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What time is it?" 6:30, Ruby answered, bouncing on her toes. "I've been up since 5. I couldn't sleep." She perched on the edge of his bed, her hands clasped together. "This is really happening, isn't it?" "Sure is, sweetheart," Eli smiled, his heart swelling at her enthusiasm. The past few months had transformed his quiet, sometimes cynical teenager into someone who believed in possibilities again. After a quick shower, Eli stood before his mirror, adjusting his tie. He'd chosen his best suit, the charcoal gray one he usually reserved for special occasions. His service medals gleamed on his lapel, polished to perfection by Ruby the night before. Downstairs, the kitchen was alive with morning activity. Ruby had already made coffee and was arranging fresh fruit on a plate. "Mara texted," she reported. "She and Noah are meeting us there at 8. They shared a quick breakfast, though Ruby was too excited to eat much more than a few bites of toast. Eli watched her check her phone every few minutes, coordinating last-minute details with her friends who were helping with the STEM demonstrations. At 7:30, they stepped out onto their front porch. The spring air held just enough chill to keep everyone alert and moving. Birds called from the trees, and the sky stretched endlessly blue above them. Instead of driving, they decided to walk the few blocks to the factory site, joining other early risers headed in the same direction. Main Street had transformed overnight. Red, white, and blue bunting decorated the storefronts, and hand-painted signs welcomed visitors to the grand opening. The smell of coffee and fresh-baked goods wafted from Dee's temporary food station, where she orchestrated a small army of volunteers setting up tables and arranging platters. "Morning, Carter family," Dee called out, waving a spatula. "Ruby, honey, your display table is all set up inside." And Eli. She paused, taking in his formal appearance with misty eyes. "Don't you clean up nice?" As they approached the factory building, Eli's steps slowed. The transformation still amazed him. Gone were the broken windows and peeling paint. The brick facade gleamed, newly cleaned and repointed. The loading dock had been converted into an accessible entrance with a graceful ramp. Above the main doors, a fresh sign proclaimed, "Veteran Skill, Service Center, Carter's Garage Training Bay." Pastor Alma stood near the entrance, greeting early arrivals. She hugged Ruby, then squeezed Eli's arm. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she said softly. "Who would have thought a snowstorm would bring all this?" More people arrived by the minute. Veterans in pressed uniforms gathered in small groups, some who'd driven hours to be there. Local shop owners set up displays showcasing future apprenticeship opportunities. A group of Ruby's classmates arranged chairs near the podium, all wearing matching STEM Team t-shirts. At 10 minutes to 8, Mara's car pulled up. Noah jumped out first, sporting a miniature tool belt over his dress clothes. His face lit up when he spotted Ruby, and he ran to show her the plastic wrench Mara had given him for the occasion. Mara emerged more slowly, elegant in a simple blue dress. Her eyes met Eli's across the growing crowd, and her smile carried all the warmth of that first night by his fireplace. She made her way to his side, slipping her hand into his. "Nervous?" she asked quietly. "A little," Eli admitted. "You?" "Terrified," she laughed. "But in a good way." Mayor Buckland approached, looking uncomfortable but determined in his Sunday best. He carried a large pair of ceremonial scissors, red ribbon trailing from the blades. "Mr. Carter," he said formally, extending his hand. "On behalf of the town council, I'd like to present you with these." Eli accepted both the handshake and the scissors, noting how the mayor's stance had shifted from opposition to grudging respect over the past months. "Thank you, Harold," he said simply. The crowd had swelled to fill the parking lot. Dee's coffee urns were running low, and the morning air had warmed enough that people were shedding jackets. A local radio station had set up speakers, playing soft music that mixed with the happy chatter of the gathering. At 8 sharp, Pastor Alma stepped to the microphone, raising her hands for quiet. Ruby tugged at Eli's sleeve. "That's our cue, Dad." They moved toward the entrance, where a wide red ribbon stretched across the doorway. Noah broke away from Mara to grab Ruby's hand, his small face serious with the importance of the moment. Together, they stepped up to the ribbon, these children who had brought their parents together, who represented everything this center stood for: second chances, new beginnings, and the power of unexpected kindness. The late morning sun warmed the crowd gathering outside the renovated factory building. Colorful banners fluttered in the spring breeze, and the scent of Dee's cinnamon rolls wafted from the refreshment tables. Veterans in pressed uniforms stood tall near the entrance, their medals glinting in the sunlight. Townspeople filled the parking lot, their chatter creating a gentle buzz of excitement. Eli adjusted his tie, scanning the faces before him. Ruby stood at his side, practically bouncing on her toes, while Mara checked the microphone at the small podium they'd set up. Her cream-colored dress caught the light, making her look like she belonged in a magazine, but her smile was warm and real as she met his eyes. "Testing, testing," Mara's voice carried clearly through the speakers. The crowd quieted, turning their attention to her. "Good morning, Maple Hollow." Her voice was steady and strong. "Thank you all for being here today. This moment represents more than just the opening of a building. It represents what happens when a community chooses hope over fear and progress over comfort." She gestured to the building behind her. The Veterans Skill and Service Center, with its Carter's Garage training bay, will provide opportunities for our veterans to build new careers, share their expertise, and strengthen the backbone of this town's economy. But more than that, it stands as a testament to what we can achieve when we work together. Mara's eyes found Eli's in the crowd, and her smile softened. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness. A tow truck in a snowstorm, a warm bowl of chili, a community willing to open its doors and its heart. Pastor Alma stepped up next, her gray hair catching the sunlight. She adjusted her glasses and looked out over the gathered faces. "I've lived in Maple Hollow for 40 years, she began, her voice rich with emotion. "I've seen storms come and go, both the kind that dump snow on our roads and the kind that test our character. But I've never been prouder of this town than I am today." She turned slightly, including everyone in her gaze. Courage isn't just about facing down physical dangers. Sometimes it's about facing our own prejudices, our own fears. It's about choosing to be kind when it would be easier to turn away. Every person here made that choice. And look what we've built together. The crowd murmured in agreement, and several people wiped their eyes. Eli felt Ruby's hand slip into his, squeezing tight. "And now," Alma continued, "I'd like to invite Eli Carter and his daughter Ruby to do the honors with this ribbon." Eli, a man who has served his country and this town with equal dedication, and Ruby, who reminds us that the future belongs to those brave enough to imagine it better. Eli and Ruby stepped forward, accepting the large ceremonial scissors. Mara joined them, Noah at her side wearing a tiny tool belt that matched the ones hanging in the new training bay. The leather still smelled fresh, and the silver buckle gleamed. "Ready?" Eli asked Ruby, positioning the scissors. "Ready," she answered, her hands joining his on the handles. Together, they cut through the red ribbon. It fluttered to the ground as cheers erupted from the crowd. The doors swung open, and people began streaming inside, their voices echoing off the newly painted walls. The interior sparkled. Overhead lights illuminated rows of pristine workbenches, each equipped with state-of-the-art tools. The computer lab gleamed with new screens, and the classroom space was set up with comfortable chairs facing a smart board. Everything smelled of fresh paint and possibility. As people explored the facility, exclaiming over the equipment and design, Eli felt a small tug on his sleeve. He looked down to find Noah gazing up at him, brown eyes serious beneath his mop of dark curls. The boy reached up, and Eli instinctively knelt down to his level. Noah's tiny tool belt clinked as he leaned in close. His voice soft but clear. "Mommy says you're a hero." The simple words, delivered with such innocent conviction, caught in Eli's throat. He glanced up to see Mara watching them, her eyes bright with unshed tears and something that looked a lot like love. The moment held, precious and perfect, as around them their community explored their new beginning, built on a foundation of trust, courage, and a single stormy night when a door opened and changed everything. Inside the Veterans Skill Service Center, sunlight streamed through the newly cleaned windows, casting warm patches across the polished concrete floors. The space hummed with activity and purpose, filled with the sounds of work and friendly conversation. At various stations throughout the main floor, veterans in neat work shirts guided their apprentices through basic tasks. Near the entrance, Dee had set up an impressive spread of pastries on fold-out tables covered in checkered cloths. The smell of her famous cinnamon rolls drew a steady stream of visitors. She beamed with pride as she handed out the treats, her quick wit and sharp memory allowing her to greet everyone by name. "Now don't you let these get cold," she called out to a young apprentice, pressing an extra roll into his hands. "Best eaten warm, just like your mama always said, Tommy." At the woodworking station, Ruby had pulled up 2 chairs for herself and Noah. The little boy sat forward eagerly, his tool belt slightly too big but worn with unmistakable pride. Ruby showed him how to sand the edges of what would become a birdhouse, her patience evident in her gentle instructions. "Like this," she demonstrated, moving the sandpaper in smooth strokes. "Not too hard, just enough to make it smooth." Noah's tongue poked out in concentration as he mimicked her movements, his small hands careful and determined. Around them, the center buzzed with activity. Pastor Alma moved between groups, offering encouragement and the occasional prayer for particularly tricky projects. Even Mayor Buckland had shown up, his initial stiffness gradually melting as he found himself drawn into a discussion about classic car restoration with 2 retired Marines. Near the automotive bay, Jack Thompson, who'd once been one of the loudest critics of outsiders changing things, was showing a teenage apprentice how to check tire pressure. His booming laugh carried across the room as the young man made a joke, any trace of previous prejudice forgotten in the simple act of sharing knowledge. The welding area sparked with careful activity, the protective screens casting dancing shadows on the walls. Sarah Chen, a Navy veteran who'd served as a metalworker on aircraft carriers, guided 3 students through basic techniques. Her quiet confidence drew others to watch, and soon a small crowd had gathered to observe the precise work. At the computer station, elderly Mr. Peterson, who'd initially grumbled about newfangled nonsense, sat beside a young woman who was patiently showing him how to use design software. His weathered face lit up when he successfully created his first 3D model, promptly calling over anyone within earshot to see what he'd accomplished. Dee wove through the crowd with a fresh tray of rolls, pausing to chat with various groups. She stopped beside 2 women comparing notes on engine repair, sliding treats onto their workbench with a knowing wink. "Nothing helps learning like a little sugar," she declared, her eyes twinkling with satisfaction at the community forming before her. The medical station, overseen by retired Army medic James Wilson, had drawn particular interest. He demonstrated proper first aid techniques to a mixed group of teenagers and adults, his steady hands showing how to wrap bandages and assess injuries. The serious subject matter didn't prevent occasional bursts of laughter as volunteers practiced on each other. Ruby's voice carried across the room as she helped Noah fit pieces of the birdhouse together. "See? The roof goes on like this," she explained, holding the pieces steady while he carefully lined them up. Her face glowed with the same patience and enthusiasm Eli had always admired in her mother. Throughout the main floor, the walls displayed photographs of local veterans through the years, their service dates and branches noted beneath each image. Visitors stopped to study them, often pointing out familiar faces or sharing stories about their own time in uniform. The display served as a quiet reminder of the deep connections running through the community. Near the refreshment table, Mrs. Rodriguez from the library had set up a small reading corner with books about various trades and military history. Several children sat cross-legged on cushions, absorbed in stories while their parents worked nearby. The space felt both productive and welcoming, exactly as Mara had envisioned it. The afternoon light shifted, casting longer shadows through the windows. Ruby helped Noah add the final touches to their birdhouse, both of them grinning at their accomplishment. She high-fived him as they admired their work, the simple gesture cementing their friendship. At various workstations, people who had once eyed each other with suspicion now shared tools and tips easily. The barriers that had seemed so important weeks ago had dissolved in the simple act of working side by side. Veterans who had kept to themselves for years now stood tall, their expertise valued and shared freely with the next generation. Eli moved through the space, checking in with instructors and students alike. He paused to watch Ruby and Noah, his heart full at the sight of his daughter's natural teaching ability. The boy's face shone with accomplishment as he held up their finished project, eager to show anyone who passed by. The sound of laughter and conversation filled the air, punctuated by the occasional whir of machinery or clang of tools. The scent of wood shavings mingled with the sweetness of Dee's baking, creating an atmosphere that felt both industrious and homey. Through it all, people moved with purpose and pride, each contributing to the center's success in their own way. Mara stood by the large window overlooking Main Street, watching the community she'd hoped to help flourish before her eyes. Eli joined her, their hands finding each other naturally. Together, they observed as Ruby showed Noah how to sign his name on the bottom of the birdhouse, the simple moment representing everything they'd worked to achieve. The late afternoon sun painted the room in warm colors, highlighting the faces of people who had become more than just neighbors. They were now partners in something larger than themselves. Veterans and civilians, young and old, all moved through the space with a sense of belonging that seemed to grow stronger with each passing minute. Eli squeezed Mara's hand gently as they watched their community come together, their fingers intertwined, standing witness to the power of second chances and open hearts. The day's golden light faded to purple dusk as volunteers tidied up the Veterans Skill Service Center. Ruby and Noah worked as a team, collecting paper plates and cups in large garbage bags, while Pastor Alma carefully wrapped leftover cinnamon rolls in wax paper. The sound of acoustic guitar drifted through the open doors from where two veterans played on the front steps, their music carrying down Main Street. Eli watched the scene with quiet satisfaction, leaning against a workbench. Tools had been returned to their proper places, work surfaces wiped clean, and the floor swept. Even with the mess of the celebration cleared away, the space held onto its warmth. Decades of dust and darkness transformed into something bright and alive. "Hard to believe this was an empty shell just weeks ago," Mara said, coming to stand beside him. She'd changed from her formal opening ceremony outfit into jeans and a soft sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Sometimes all a place needs is someone to see what it could be," Eli replied, glancing at her with a small smile. The guitar music shifted to an old hymn, and several volunteers hummed along as they worked. Noah darted past, wearing his tool belt proudly as he helped Ruby carry a box of decorations to the storage closet. "Those two have become quite the team," Mara observed, watching their children work together. "Ruby's always wanted a little brother," Eli said softly. "It's good to see her taking him under her wing." As the last volunteers gathered their belongings and said their goodnights, Dee stopped to hug both Eli and Mara. "Y'all did good," she said firmly. This town needed something to believe in again. Pastor Alma was the last to leave, pausing at the door. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Sometimes through blizzards and broken-down cars." Finally, only Eli, Mara, Ruby, and Noah remained. The guitar music had faded, replaced by the gentle hum of crickets starting their evening chorus. Eli moved through the space, checking that everything was secure. He tested each window lock, adjusted the thermostat, and made sure the security system was armed. At the main entrance, he pulled out the new keys, shining brass, not yet dulled by use. The lock clicked with satisfying finality as he turned it. Eli ran his hand along the smooth metal of the door, remembering how recently it had been rusted and forgotten. "Ready to head home?" he asked, turning to the others. They walked together down Main Street, their footsteps echoing on the empty sidewalk. The streetlights had just flickered on, creating pools of warm light at regular intervals. Noah held Ruby's hand, chattering about all the things he wanted to build in the workshop. When they reached the old pickup truck, Eli helped Noah climb into the back seat, while Mara settled beside him. Ruby took her usual spot in the front, immediately pulling out her phone to scroll through photos from the day. The drive to the farmhouse was peaceful, with only the soft sound of tires on pavement and the occasional comment from Noah about the stars appearing in the darkening sky. As they turned onto the gravel drive, the familiar crunch under the wheels felt different somehow, more like coming home than just arriving. Eli parked beside Mara's SUV, which had become a regular sight in his driveway over the past weeks. The porch light cast a welcoming glow, and through the kitchen window he could see the dishes from their hurried breakfast still in the drying rack. As Ruby helped Noah out of the truck, Mara touched Eli's arm lightly. "Can we talk for a minute?" They lingered by the porch steps while the kids went ahead inside, their excited voices carrying through the screen door as they discussed plans for tomorrow's projects. "I've been thinking about that night," Mara said, looking up at the clear sky. "When you found us in the storm, you could have just called a tow truck, left us at a motel." "Wasn't any need for that," Eli replied, humble as always. "But that's just it," Mara continued. "You opened your door to complete strangers, gave us shelter, food, warmth. And not just that night. You kept opening doors. To the Foundation's ideas, to change, to—" She paused, meeting his eyes. "To us." Eli was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "My mama used to say that a closed door is just a chance to show who you really are by opening it." Mara stepped closer, her voice soft. "Thank you for opening that first door, Eli Carter." The porch light illuminated her face, showing the sincerity in her expression. Behind them, Noah's laugh rang out from inside the house, followed by Ruby's voice, calling them to come see something. Eli reached for the screen door, holding it open for Mara. She stepped past him into the warmth of the farmhouse, and he followed, closing the door behind them. Through the windows, light spilled out into the dark yard, as if the house itself was sharing the warmth of the family gathering inside. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Eli Carter, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.